It's been a while. We've been trying to set this up for like 3 weeks, I think, like a month almost. We had two situations get canceled.
Yeah.
But I've been looking forward to this. Like when you reached out, I was already very, very interested in what you do, because it's something that I've always been curious about, how the industry works over there, whether it's the movie industry or documentaries, news, things like that. And obviously, I'm also kind of involved in it in some way, shape, or form in media. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Okay, so like, do you want to just start from the beginning? When somebody asks you, when you meet them in a social setting, what do you do? How do you describe what you do?
Okay, that's actually something I'm still working on. Like, what's my pitch? When I meet someone at a party, and most of the time, even some of my friends, they're like, "What do you do actually?" So I think the way I would describe me is that I'm a content producer. So basically, you give me a budget, you give me a deadline, and I try to make it work. So that could be, and then among that, like over the past year, because I started my company last year, and over the past year, I've done a lot of jobs in all shape or form. So I've done like a movie subtitle for movies. I've been like a story director for a documentary that was actually happening in Yiwu. I've done like research for that same documentary series. Like it was like a 5-part series about all the way like the town of Yiwu is like the business model over there. Actually, when I was doing my research, like I was looking on YouTube and I found one of your video when you were comparing Yiwu and Guangzhou. So thank you for that.
I think, so you used some of the info from my video?
Like we didn't use it in the documentary itself, but like
no, I mean, it's cool that it was a reference for you. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, like we were like we were reaching out to a lot of people. I was really fascinated to discover like all those YouTube channel that are focusing on all the markets and all the factory here in China. Actually, one of our character, like the people we're following, like Tony, he has like he has a channel on YouTube only focused on about toys, and he's interesting guys. Next to this, I do a podcast, and right now I'm like developing a series for a documentary. So as you can see, like I do a lot of random stuff, but at the end of the day, like I would describe myself, I'm just like a content producer. Like someone comes up to me and they say, "Aladin, we need your help," as basically some kind of consultant. So we need you to do this in order to make the content. Like, can you do this in that amount of time, or can you take care of the budget, or can you look for stories? Hope that's clear enough.
Yeah, I think it is. So just to clarify, you discovered us through YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also on top of that, so which form of media do you do the most work in?
So far, mainly in documentary. And so basically for the people who wouldn't know, like documentary is not like the most, let's say, famous form of entertainment, but that's, I think, one of the most stable. But so basically in documentaries, you have two forms. Like you have like the TV world, where basically like you have a TV channel and they have like a time slot, and every Friday at 8 p.m. they need their documentary about like nature. So that means that if you can bring them like good quality content, they would be interested by it. Now, of course, as the world of TV is kind of disappearing and you have like all the online platform, whether it's Netflix, Hulu in the West, or Youku, Aichi in China, and I'm sure like I'm not aware of all the online platforms in the world. But basically, like you have all those like 1 hour documentary that are often series, and those are like commission based. So you have like those platforms, and they need to fill up their content. So that's kind of the stable area. And then you have another type of documentary which is even more difficult, which is like a feature documentary. So those are like documentary that go to the cinema. And those are like the really artistic, really creative, and kind of a really gamble type of creativity, because you will try to put this in the cinema, but then you don't know if this is going to work.
Yeah.
So basically what I would do is that I would often work on TV documentary because it's more stable. And then from time to time I would work on a feature documentary. So for example, recently I've worked as a producer on a documentary about a Chinese man who climbed Mount Everest. And the kicker is that this guy is blind, actually, but he managed to go all the way to the top of the mountain.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's really good. So I guess, like, for example, there's Last Train Home. I'm sure you know that doc about.
Yeah, well, actually, Last Train Home is the director is Fan Sin, and that's the director that I'm working with about like the blind guy. So that's the same director.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's pretty fucking cool. That's one of my favorite documentaries, actually. Like we have a Discord for Source Asia. We have a digital community, and we actually did a watch party where we watched Last Train Home. That was about 3 weeks ago. And I watched it before. I watched it I think twice when I was in China. Because when I started my company, I was trying to learn a little bit more about Chinese culture and some of the things that are around it. So I decided to watch it again with the Discord, and everybody loved the documentary. And I mean, it's just a very fascinating insight into a different world completely, So can you maybe start from the beginning, in the sense that, like, how did you end up in this position?
First of all, okay, so my life work.
Yep.
Quickly, I will try to be as brief as possible. So I'm from France. I'm from Paris, but I'm a nice guy. People have a really bad. People from Paris have a bad reputation, but some of us are nice people.
I'm from Canada, and we have a nice reputation, but I'm a bad guy.
So basically, I was studying like Chinese history and film and TV. So those are like the two masters that I was doing. And so obviously I ended up working in historical documentary for a few years in France. And then one day I came to China because we have, like, everyone knows that we have film festival, like Venice, Cannes, Beijing, and so on, or Toronto. But then we have also like those, it's a little bit like the Guangzhou Fair for you guys, but for us it's more like we have market, which are really focused, where producer and TV channel, they meet and they kind of strike deal. And those are like market, and those are like something that the public never knows about. And so in 2014, I went to Chengdu because there was like this event called Sun Asian Side of the Doc. So I went there, and I actually, Fan Sin, the director of Last Train Home, was kind of the main organizer over there. Because yeah, he's like basically like a factual content royalty, let's call him this way. And when I arrived in China, so I was really struck by, I guess that's like the typical story that everyone says, like the first time we arrived in China, oh my God, such high buildings, everything seems so big and so massive. Like I knew that China was not like, the thing we could see on things from picture from the 80s, but I have to admit, like when I arrived in Chengdu, and I thought I would arrive in some kind of, not backwater town, but you see it in the middle of the country, you're like, what is this place? So I arrived here, I saw like how things were big, and there were a lot of local content producer, and there was kind of a moment, things have a little bit changed now, but that was a moment when everyone was like, let's go to China to make co-production and to make content together, because China is like such a huge market. Now the time where the Chinese middle class is rising, they want more entertainment, they want more fun. So that's the moment when we can try to tap into this market. So after Chengdu, I basically decided to leave everything behind. So I was working in France, I had a small company, I had my own project, but I basically dropped everything. And I went to Nanjing, learned Chinese for a couple of years. Then I went to work for a private company in China. I worked then just as COVID was started, the company fired everyone because they could not, keep everyone around.
Then I went. A lot of companies did, yeah, during that time period.
Yeah, I mean, there were 50 of us, and that was just like impossible to, you know, keep everyone on the paycheck. So then I went to work at CGTN Français, where, you know, like a stable job. But within a year, I quit and I started my company that I'm running now. Like, if I want to make it quick and fast. Hope that's.
I guess I'm curious about also like what got you into documentary making in general. Like what inspired you when you were younger and things like that?
That's a question that I often ask myself. I think what's nice in documentary is that often what I like about this is that you're often like in a much smaller scale. Like when we talk about movies, I mean, everyone who stick around the credit of movie, you can see like hundreds and hundreds of names. And so in order to have like a real decision making and be at the top, like you need years and years of, you know, hustling and doing your stuff. But whereas documentary, because it's smaller scale, smaller team, you have more creativity and you have more input. And anyone who works like, I mean, for example, on Lisin's last documentary, so I was working on the production side of it, but because I know how to do a bit of film editing, then I get the chance to, you know, do like a couple of scenes when you throw me footage, and then I'm like trying my luck, trying things. And at the end, like one of the scenes I edited ends up in the movie. And I think like if you work on TV series or fiction or animation, like none of this could be possible because those things are much bigger in scale. So everyone has their own spot and you tend to keep it that way. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I like it. And also on a more Freudian level, my dad is an actor. So maybe I don't want to work with actors. His name is Jean-Paul Farré. But he's mostly known in France for theater play, not so much like on movies.
You should send me some links. Send me and Jamie some links so we can put it in the description, you know. And also, of course, your series and documentaries. Just on a selfish level, I want to ask about. So I've been thinking about doing a documentary about my dad, which. Ironically, you mentioned your dad. I've been thinking about doing a documentary about my dad. I have the story idea in my mind. Just like, can you kind of break down what is the importance, the 20% that brings you most of the results in creating a good documentary?
I think it's very interesting what you mentioned because just to give you a comparison. I was a couple of months ago, I was at the Rio last indie film festival in China, which is called First Film Festival. It's happening in Xining in the Qinghai province. It's really somewhere interesting because, you know, the further away you are from Beijing, the nicer stuff you can look at because, you know, local government doesn't care as much because they're happy because, you know, it brings like culture stuff. So, and over there, like all the documentary that I saw, and I think this is going to answer your question, there were, I think, 5 or 6 documentary. I think I've watched every single one of them. But you would realize that every single time the documentary director would have like a direct link to the subject. So for example, like there was a guy was like trying to be, the movie is called Trashy Boy. It's a really interesting film. It's about like a guy who tries to be a rapper, but he's kind of this really wacky dude from a really small city in China, and who used to be a drug trafficker. He was doing a little bit of drug trafficking, so then he got arrested. But then he tries to be like a rapper, and so he tries to do like live stream show, and he's like playing the guitar, and then he does some rap. And then he becomes like a small celebrity in the town. But the director is his like oldest best friend. Or then you have like another director, she's basically filming her parents in the remote town in Yunnan, and basically they're like getting old, but the director filmed her parents. So I think for anyone who wants to make like an interesting factual content, the one thing you should do is to have access. As long as you have a good access, as long as you have a good topic and you have access to it, then all you have to do is have an okay shot and a good sound, and the rest doesn't matter. I think that's like the first thing. But then I don't know, like I would be interested, like let's say typically I'm a producer and you're a director and you're like, I want to make a documentary about my dad. My first question would be like, why is your dad worth being, shown on a movie screen for 1 hour, 1 hour and a half?
1 hour. To keep the story brief, I was born in Zambia. My dad's obviously Zambian, Southern Africa, and when he's the oldest in his family. When he was around 10 years old, his mom disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to her. There was accusations that his dad killed her. Yeah, so that's the beginning of the thing. I think there's about 8 kids, and then at that stage, when the mom disappeared, they all got separated and sent to different relatives to live with them. And then he joined the military when he got older, to support like the rest of the kids, to help them go through school. And he was living in before he was in the military, he was living in like a village in Africa, in Zambia. And then he ended up becoming the CEO of like a multinational corporation and multi-billion dollar company, and like a branch of that company in Zambia. And then he started his own businesses and things like that, and put me through private school and supported, I would say, like maybe 100 people in his family that he educated and supported and all that stuff. And we traveled around the world and moved to the US, moved to Canada. Like, so I think there's a lot of meat on that bone to discuss. Like, because I think about it from the aspect of the chances of his success was so slim. Like, it was almost 0% chance that somebody in his position would end up where he became. You know what I mean? Built multiple houses. Like, he's done a lot. He's done a lot.
I think because this is like what we do typically. So I work with Family Scene, for example. I work part-time at this company. They're one of my regular clients. And we're actually into their office. So, you can take a quick peek. But joke aside, like what I realized that often we would receive pitches, because Lee Sin is like such a big name in documentary. So you would have always people sending him pitches, and often people, all the time people in China, because he lives in China. So we are kind of this pool where people send a lot of stories and like, hey, what do you think of that and stuff like this. I'm not gonna share because we've got interesting stuff, but we can't put this out in the open as long as the contract is not signed. But what I realize, especially in China, is that people are used to, they think, and this is why I think documentary has like such a bad reputation sometimes, is because people just describe what has happened before. But I think if you want to make a good show, a good documentary, what you need is that you need to have conflict, and you need to show that, okay, here is basically, you would write like a couple of pages, and the first paragraph is basically the intro of who is this character or the town, the situation. It could be like a town, a place, a company, whoever. But then basically the first 15-20% should be like, yes, the background, what has this person done? But then the real question is, when you start filming, what are the conflict, what are the situation, what are the thing that this character wants to solve, what are the thing ahead. And I realized that in China, like, you would have people who basically they write 2 pages, but then 90% is about what has the person has done before. But none of the thing was on camera, so we don't care. Like, it's just like the intro, that person has done this for the last 10, 15, 20 years. But if you don't have a lot of shots, then in terms of editing, then you just end up showing that in a couple of minutes because you don't have enough footage. So then to move on, like, now my next question as the producer is like, for example, what does your dad, what's his upcoming problem or his upcoming project? Because from what I've seen, like, he's already overcame everything now. Everything is cool. So,
well, I mean, he does have some conflict now, in the sense that, like, he's almost 70, and I feel like he just retired a few years ago, and I feel like he's just trying to figure out, after being at the top of the mountain, Everest, right? Now he's blind. Like, he doesn't really know what to do with his self right now. And then, I mean, he's trying to develop a farm, and this retirement life, I feel like he still wants to be busy, but he doesn't have the same level of energy and stuff like that. So because he's older, and of course the kids are not at home. You know what I mean? So everybody's moved on with their lives and things like that. So maybe that's the conflict for my dad right now.
How to stay relevant. Oh my god. That really touched home. I don't know if the audience care, but my dad has basically the same issue. I hope he doesn't speak English, so he's not going to understand what I say. But after and he's on Wikipedia, he's done many shows, he has like produced his own stuff. But now I can feel that right now he also feels scared of staying relevant, because now most of his generation of like directors or metteurs en scène, I don't know what's the word in English, but like people who are the directors but for play, like his generation, because he's also like about 17.
Playwrights or producers as well, directors.
Yeah, but like his generation, everyone's retired or dead or senile. So now he doesn't have as much connection as he had like when he was 30, 40, 50, 60. And now you have new generation, and he doesn't really care so much about social media, so he could not, stay up in the mindset of people. So yeah, I think the situation with your dad, like how to stay relevant when you still have all your mind, but maybe you're, you're retired. I think that could be an interesting topic, like definitely. And I think especially as everywhere in the world, people, they keep aging and the life expectancy keeps rising. But I guess, I think that definitely, like that would be definitely a topic to dig in.
It's interesting because like I guess I could compare and contrast with myself. I just turned 30, right, this year. So there's an aspect when I turned 30, I started thinking about like death and mortality more than I ever did before. And then I'm thinking about my dad, and I'm like, okay, so like I'm on this upward trajectory with my business, right? So I'm trying to get to the level and maybe past the level that my dad was at. I started earlier than him in the sense of starting a company younger than him, and I've been pretty good so far. And then I was just thinking about that, is like I kind of understand a little bit on some level like what my dad is going through, because when you're at the peak of your powers, let's say, and then in the future you can't really like influence the way you influence right now. So like for me, it's like I'm in a different stage, but I'm looking at my dad and I'm like, he's been where I've been before, and now he can't do the same things, and I wonder how that feels, kind of thing. I can't actually fully imagine it. So I don't know, that would be an interesting, you gave me like a really good idea of how this documentary could work out, because before it was more just about like, I want to document my dad's history and stuff like that, and I think it would be interesting for a lot of people, because I haven't seen any documentaries like that in the sense of like an African man who's come from this stage to this stage of his life. You see a lot of that stuff in Western media, right? Like the rise to success and all that stuff, but you don't really see that with people in Africa. So all right,
and
so
just to tie up for anyone in the audience, this is why if any of you has like some kind of creativity passion, like this is why you need if you want to write a book, then this is why you need an editor to kind of bounce back with you, or if you're a director or a playwright, you need like a producer to kind of bounce back with you. Like any creativity, it's not just like being crazy in a room by yourself. Like you need to have a team to be with you and to kind of guide you in the way, because I think like no one is like smart enough to create a wonderful piece of art just by themselves.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, so this is what you do. So like if I wanted to hire you, or somebody who's watching this right now, listening to this, what's the process? How does that work?
That's interesting. Yeah, because most of the people, like recently, for example, I was approached by a friend of mine. Like she's an architect, and she was asking me a question about, okay, we're designing this new museum, because in China. Recently, like in the 80s, there were only 30 museums, but as of today, there are over 5,000 museums in China. So, like you just keep building and it's booming. And And basically, so she's working on that museum, and she's like, yeah, Aladin, we need video, because now it's not just, you put like some, it's not like local town museum when they just put a couple of pictures. This is like private company museum, so they want the best. They want like interactive video. They want to have like places where people can take selfies so that they can share it on social media. Like it's a whole experience. And she comes up to me and she's like, I need video. But then she was kind of not knowing even the grammar of how to define this service. Like she's like, how should I quantify the budget, or it's like how many minutes, but it's like a minute of content can, you just take your phone and, like I just like do this for 1 minute, it cost me $3. But then if you do an animation for 1 minute, then it could cost you like thousands and thousands of dollars. So I think the first question for anyone who wants, to hire content producer for a video, like the first question is what's your idea, what do you want to achieve? And then the second thing is that if you want to make video, it's because you certainly have seen a competitor doing video as well. So then you're like, oh, I like what they've done with this product, the way they present the product, I want to do the same. I also want my Douyin channel on my live stream or my Bilibili account to talk about my product. And then you would kind of think, okay, I want this the same way. So then that's when you contact your producer, and the first question the producer will ask you is, okay, but do you have any example that you can show me? And from that example, I can basically give you a budget, and then you tell me if it's too high. Of course, it's always going to be too high for everyone. But yeah, I think that would be a process. Like first, find an example of what kind of video you want to do, and then try to see a budget and a timing with someone who can help you to do that.
It's really, really good advice. What were some of the earliest, I guess, struggles when you started working in China?
So my earliest struggle,
second question, how did you figure it out?
Obviously, yeah. What was my own struggle? What was the documentary I could have done about me? To be honest, I was a little bit too proud, I guess, because when I arrived in China, so first I was advised by a dear friend of mine, Arthur Johns. He's a documentary filmmaker. Okay, yeah, fun fact, next to the office, we have like a PLA small office, and sometimes like 3 times a day they would go out chanting stuff. We're in Sanlitun in Beijing.
I've definitely experienced that in China. One of my 5 years living in China. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. So I met Arthur, and I was asking him like, okay, you've been in China for back then he was like almost 20 years for him, and he's done like a lot of ads and documentary and stuff like that. And I was asking like, what's the first thing to do? And he's like, okay, first you should go to school and you should learn Chinese. Otherwise, like there is no way you're gonna survive. In an insight, if you have like a really specific technical ability, like be a cameraman, like you can survive. But at the end of the day, it will be better to speak Chinese at some point. And I think it goes for every country where you want to go and live. So I go to study Chinese for 1.5 years, and then I was looking for a job. And I have to admit, I thought I would find a job really easily because I had works experience back in France. I've been a director, a producer. I've done my own project, and I work for bigger companies. So I thought it's not gonna be easy, but this is not gonna be hard. And it took me 5 months to find something, and I was really that close to give up. I thought like maybe that was a bad idea. Maybe I should just go home, or maybe I would actually go to live in Shanghai for a couple of months, and I will just like go to every single parties and try to slowly build up my connection. And I think so that was the problem. At the end, I found one job in this private company, the one that fired everyone when COVID started. So basically I realized that my biggest hurdle was that when I wanted to, and then later on it kept confirming, because then I was trying to do side hustle because I have this stable job, and then I want to do my own small thing, do a little bit of gigs here and there, like video, write articles, stuff like that. And I realized like the only way was basically to know people, because at the end, like you have abilities, and I know I have abilities, but then it's really soul crushing when no one calls you up and say, Aladin, I need your help to do this. And the only way to get there is you just have to meet tons of people, so that kind of the word spreads out that, oh, this guy, he does this, he does that, he's an expert in this. Mm-hmm. And when my friend who is doing the museum ask me, can you help us to work on this? It basically took me 3-4 years, so that kind of the word spreads out. So now I'm really happy because I'm at this stage where now people comes to me. It doesn't always work, but now, and I still have to, you know, contact people and prepare budget and stuff like that. Or, you know, sometimes you have like random, I don't know in your industry if this is like this, but for us, sometimes we have like random WeChat group request. You have like someone posting, oh, we need like a film editor right now, or we need a host, or we need whatever. And then those are like the most bizarre people you ever talk with, but sometimes it's super instructive. But so yeah, the fact that basically, to recap, I had abilities, but then in order to find projects, then I just needed to know more people. And that was kind of my way out, is that just, you know, go out, meet people. At the same time, I think also we have to kind of know our limits. Like I would not want, now I realize like you can't be friends with everyone. Like I'm not gonna say a name, but I realized there was this Western guy who is a producer or claims to be. And at the beginning I was trying to, you know, be super friendly with him because I thought we could help out each other. But I always had this kind of sense that he was kind of a weird guy. And as time goes by, I realized that he was not a reliable person and he was a liar. And you know, like at some point I had to learn like how to cut contact with some people, because it's one thing to go out and meet people and expand your network, but there are some people that they are actually, I think they are like kind of black hole, and if you stay too much with them, like they would kill your confidence or they will like be bad with you. It's hard to describe, but I think at some point you have to know your limit and try to just reach out to the right people.
Well, some people suck your energy. Yeah, they do. Like I really do believe that. Like, what's the quote? Also, you're the sum of the 5 people spend the most amount of time with. You know, you've heard of that quote before. So there's an aspect of just like, if you're around people that are constantly being sketchy, lying, things like that, like it's gonna affect you as a person, your energy, your emotions, whatever, you know, and your ability to focus on being productive, you know. So yeah, I completely understand that. I think if somebody's listening to this right now, they would be asking themselves, what is the difference between doing media in China versus in France, for example, or Europe, Western media?
To clarify, do you mean like media in terms of news, like CNN, CCTV, or more?
Maybe you can give a generalization or whatever you think is more important to point out.
Okay. And to finish my question, or we're not talking about entertainment, because okay, so here is the thing, like a lot of people, we have basically, so in the world of documentary is always you're telling a story, and but you know, even being a YouTuber, and so for example, I forgot, but one of my gig is that I'm helping this one guy from Sweden, Eric. He's like a YouTuber, and he does those kind of survival video, and I put his video on Bilibili, and people in China really appreciate it because that's some kind of content you cannot do in China. Like you cannot just, you know, start cutting trees and building a house in the middle of nowhere. Like that would be completely forbidden. So people really appreciate that. So yeah, you know, like documentary could be many forms, and it's kind of a mashup of different kind of content. So you would have the world of documentary, but this is more like entertainment. Like the idea is like to, you know, like just teach you something or show you a world that you have no idea about, or, you know, see someone's dad struggle, like I think, so that maybe can resonate with you. So that's the first world. But then the world of news is just like, you know, the latest Ukraine offensive military to take back their territory, or the Elizabeth II death, you know, things like that, like the latest thing.
I guess most of the people ask me about like the restrictions around news, I guess. And
okay.
I have a question about the documentary thing as well, in the sense that do you think a movie like Last Train Home could be done today? Would they get the same level of access and, you know, these kind of things? So
okay.
Yeah.
So quickly about news, because I've been working at CGTN Français. So for those who don't know, CGTN is it's like CCTV, and it's like the international media outlet of CCTV, and you have a lot of those. You have like Sierra, you have China Daily, and People's Daily. They all have like their English or French or Spanish or whatever version. Like CRI, China Radio International, I think they have like over 50 language. They even have like Esperanto. So, you know, like if you speak Esperanto and you want to work in Beijing, you have a shot. But joke aside, like the main difference, and because I'm also part of the FCCC, which is like a correspondent club of foreign journalists who are working in China, the difference is that mainly if you work in a state media, orders come from above, and you can pitch stories, but most of the time, like you would have. I've worked a little bit at AFP, which is like one of the top 3 main news agency, but that was like years ago. So you have AFP, Reuters,
and Associated Foreign Press, right?
Agence France Presse, which is like a France press agency.
Oh.
But from what I see, what's interesting in the media world is that basically you have, from what I see, and I think that goes both way whether it's Western countries or in China, like everyone kind of copy each other. Like there is a main news, and then basically everyone is rushing after this. Like if Ukraine starts a military offensive, basically everyone's going to talk about it. And the question is, who's going to break the story? If you break the story, then everyone's going to follow up. But I think like in China, people just, and especially at CGTN, like we would be more following what CCTV has pushed as CCTV or Xinhua, and then we would, you know, like basically report the same news. But I have a friend like who works at AFP, and he told me that the same. Also, sometimes they go and check like what CGTN has published, and they also use those kind of content and news so that they can put it for their own readers. So, sorry, maybe it's a little bit messy, but the idea is that I think generally for basic news, everyone kind of is working the same, but in terms of like breaking news story, then Western media so far, because they have more money and they are more incentive, because, you know, most of Western media
more money.
Well, okay, here, well, maybe they don't have more money, but then they have more incentive, because when you're the New York Times or Le Monde, like French biggest newspaper, one of the biggest one, or El País, or Toronto Star, I guess. I think that's the name.
Yeah, Toronto Star, yeah.
Basically, the idea is that the only way for you to survive is that you have to have readers and you have people to pay membership. But when you're in a state media, like CGTN, all your budget is coming from the state. All your budget is coming from, I don't know exactly which places, but you don't have the same incentive. Because like CGTN would be more a work of representation. Like we want to show the world what's the point of view of China, but they don't care as much about how much reader they have. So I think that's one of the main difference, is that when you are a private media, and yes, you can get subsidies, or yes, you can be the BBC and you get basically subsidies with everyone paying up, you know, their yearly money to the state so that the BBC can stay independent and relevant. But at the end of the day, like those media abroad, because I'm in China, like they rely on their readers to buy membership most of the time. Whereas in China, I think the main difference is that you just have like someone footing you the bill, and then you have a mandate, you have to report about those kind of topic. So therefore, you know, it's not the same thing. When I was at CGTN, sometimes we would put tweets about a news that was like 2 days old. And you kind of think this is not relevant anymore. We should have posted that 2 days ago, but because it goes through a longer process of verifying news and translating and stuff like that, then the problem is that then we're not relevant. But you know, that's the mandate. We have to talk about this, but it doesn't matter if it's 2 days old, which I think is a bit sad.
Do you feel sometimes like I guess a little bit restricted, or like, you know, in terms of creativity and ideas and things like that?
Well, I mean, obviously,
as much as you can say without getting in trouble.
Obviously, there are regulation in China. I mean, everyone knows this, but I think like there is also just